Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the very first episode of PGIM India Mutual Funds presents LiveMint, Amend, Adjust and Adapt. This is a series of high-powered virtual panel discussions where we're really taking a look at what it means to be successful in the post-COVID world. I'm Vikram Chandra, founder of Editor G Technologies, and today we're going to be looking a bit at the economy and at the markets. Let's just look at the data. So when you're looking at what is actually happening in the economy, what's your sense? I mean, we've heard it's a demand problem, no, it's a supply problem, no, it's a bit of both. How bad is the situation out there? You must be looking at the data, and you probably understand the data way more than just about anybody else I can think of in the country. What's actually happening?
The situation is very bad. I mean, let's not kid ourselves on. But, it does make a lot of difference in terms of the diagnosis, whether you're talking about what has been happening and what will happen in the future as a supply problem or a demand problem. And let's be very clear about some things, which is the lockdown itself was not a demand shock. The lockdown was a supply shock. It will have demand consequences, but that follows. It is essentially a supply shock. But here's the thing, that you have to recognize in terms of policy making, that policy should not always trail events. Quite often, policy has to precede an event. You have to be able to project what is likely to happen and take measures before. So, when we talk about monetary policy, we always use the term being ahead of the curve. In fiscal policy as well, you actually should be ahead of the curve, given the magnitude of the problems we're dealing with now. Let me outline the nature of the problem that we're coming up. We've had a two-month plus supply shock. We've lost about 20% of GDP during this period, maybe higher. What's going to happen post-lockdown is we'll transition from a supply constraint to a demand constraint. If the government does not kick in with a demand stimulus at that point in time, which is this point in time, in terms of simply timing, the lockdown is substantially lifted. So the government needs to come in now. Otherwise, what will happen is that as firms try to come back into production, they're going to face a demand problem. Okay. In which case, what will happen is that the chain of shocks that the companies are facing simply becomes longer, and it is going to strain their ability to survive. And if the action is taken too late, what you will end up getting is a very large number, particularly of the MSME units, who will simply pack up and go under. Yeah. In which case, later during the year, you can expect the supply constraint to kick back in. Not because of any policy reason, but simply because firms have gone bankrupt, right? So time is of urgency. I mean, I like barbell strategies, but the point is, here you have to be ahead of the curve. I'm afraid I'm not hearing that.
If you were given a choice of doing two or three things right now, would it be monetary side? Would it be spending? If spending, where spending? Do an infrastructure push? Who knows, a defense push is going to probably happen in any case, whether we like it or not, given everything else that's happening. What would you do? What would be the two or three pieces of advice you give the government right now?
I think we need to be very clear about the nature of the problem. There has already been a lot of focus on rural India. So if you think about the measures that the government has already taken, and mind you, these are not insubstantial, most of them are rural facing. But if you look at the data...
Can I just interrupt you for a minute? Is rural India really where the problem is? Because you could argue that agriculture is actually doing quite well.
You're absolutely right. Rural India is not where the problem is.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Rural India may inherit the problem with the migrants returning, but that will be only a part of the problem. The larger part of the problem is in urban India. And up to now, I have heard absolutely nothing about how the government intends to tackle the problem that are endemic in urban India today. That's where the bulk of your unemployment is. So what's happening is in rural India, you've pumped in money, you've had a great harvest, you've done a very successful PDS operation, so your procurement has been excellent. All of the good things have happened. The NREGS money is going into rural India, creating rural demand. But what about urban India? And urban India is where the pain is maximum. Now we have a situation where I have not heard any kind of proposal as to what do we do to boost incomes and demand in urban India, which will actually be the backbone for the revival of a large chunk of industry. Remember, urban India accounts maybe only for 30% of the population, but it accounts for nearly 55% of total consumption in the country, right? You're not addressing that 55%. Now, if you don't address that, then you're asking for trouble down the road. Urban India will tend to have somewhat higher savings, so they will be able to sustain themselves for a little bit longer than the rural poor. But the point is that that's not infinite. Maybe from 2 weeks to 3 weeks for the rural poor, it may be 2 to 3 months for the urban poor, but certainly not more than that.